Some of the most fascinating tales in human history are the ones we conjure ourselves. Stories of ghosts, monsters, demons, and devils wrapped up in folkloric tomes from the very depths of our past. We like to think of these stories as just fairy tales, wild but ultimately fictitious, and certainly no reason to lose sleep. But what if they were rooted in reality? One Western European fairy tale, that of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, has much more to it than meets the eye. I said has and not may have there. This is a story with gut-wrenching, dread-inducing, painful concrete evidence, which is told in such a haunting manner from the poor medieval families that lived through it. Join us as we embark on a petrifying journey into the medieval history of Lower Saxony to uncover the very real mystery behind the Pied Piper of Hamelin. I'm Tom, this is Niall, and welcome to the Campfire Archives. Niall, are you at all familiar with the story of the Pied Piper?
I am. I remember this from when I was a kid, and even then it was quite horrific from what I recall. Is the basic premise that the townspeople won't pay him to get rid of the rats, so he drowns a load of kids?
So, the condensed version of the fairy tale, for those of you that don't know it, it's not particularly a happy one. Basically, a mysterious musician dressed in colourful clothing and armed with a magical pipe enters the medieval German town of Hamelin to rid the citizens of their rat problem. Using the pipe, he drives the rats out of the settlement and into the Weser River in exchange for a large sum of gold. He returns to the village, having done the job, but the piper is angered by the townspeople's refusal to pay him the full sum for his work, and then he turns on the citizens of Hamelin. So now, dressed in green like a hunter, the man uses the pipe's magical powers once again, only this time he lures the children of the town away from their families and towards a cave in the mountains, never to return. 3 children remain, one lame, one deaf, and one blind, who are unable to follow him into the mountains, and therefore they inform the townspeople of what has transpired. Lighter versions of the tale tell of the piper taking the children to a beautiful world beyond our own, where more traditionally darker ones, as you say, he killed the children as he did the rats in the river.
I mean, the fact that you say this has some truth in it is terrifying. Like, awful. This is going to be an awful episode already. I just know it.
I mean, on some rare occasions, he's said to have returned the children to Hamelin after the townsfolk pay him a slightly more extortionate amount of gold, but that doesn't happen here.
No.
Spoiler alert, it doesn't happen here. So, yeah, that tale, I guess it's ringing a couple of bells now. You're familiar with it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm up to speed.
So, shockingly, the tale that we have just heard may be based on a real event. It might not be just the story. So, Hamelin is indeed a very real place. It's in the Lower Saxony area of what is today Germany. The story itself is set in the year 1284, at which time Hamelin was a prosperous little town on the banks of the Weser River, thriving through agriculture and mining. It was fortified with walls to keep raiders and invaders at bay, and like most of Western Europe in medieval times, it was deeply religious. While the tale of the Pied Piper has been interpreted and published by the likes of the Brothers Grimm and Robert Browning in the 18th and 19th centuries, the earliest mention can be found much, much earlier. So around the year 1300, so just less than 2 decades after the story is set, a stained glass window was established in Hamelin's church. So the window depicted, of all people, the piper, dressed in red and green robes, playing his pipe in the countryside just outside of Hamelin, as a long line of children dressed in white follow him away from the town's gate. While the original was destroyed in 1600, historian Hans de Bertin has recreated it, and the window is believed to have commemorated a deeply tragic historical event for the citizens of Hamelin. Interestingly, this is where Hamelin's historical records seemingly begin, so nothing is in the record prior to that, really, for Hamelin.
Prior to the window,
Prior to the window. The window is what the oldest thing we know of in Hamelin.
Interesting.
Almost nothing has been obtained prior to 1300. It's simply as though something caused the townspeople to eradicate their past and start from scratch. It's already really weird. The mysterious event in question led to the creation of the stained glass window. The seeming effort to scrub historical records prior to it seems to be linked to the piper himself, but historians have never been able to agree on what exactly might have happened, but that doesn't stop there from being quite a few theories. I mean, what are you thinking so far? Any initial thoughts about what might have happened?
My first thought is a stained glass window is no mean feat to produce. That's a lot of work. Would you be doing that over some fairy tale that you'd dreamt up? I don't know. Very odd. And the fact there's no records before that point in time, you're clearly commemorating something that's happened in this town. Because I'm assuming, I don't know of any record from anywhere else. It's always been the Pied Piper of Hamelin. No other town has got stained glass windows showing a bloke leading away kids with a flute or what have you.
Seems
So
to have just been Hamelin.
interesting. Yeah. Something odd is obviously going on there.
Yeah, we're off to a bad start, aren't we? So this brings us to the Lüneburg manuscript. So vital proof that this mysterious event had a profound and long-lasting impact on the people of Hamelin, whatever it was. So the manuscript is an early German account of the event in question, discovered by Heinrich Spanuth in the city of Lüneburg's archives in 1936. The manuscript itself is written largely in Latin and Middle Low German and is believed to have been penned by an unknown monk between 1440 and 1450. The text records the tragic real-life disappearance of 130 children from Hamelin, which took place on the 26th of June, 1284. Here's the creepy bit. The children didn't just vanish, according to this manuscript. They were led away from town by, you guessed it, a piper. The manuscript does not mention that there was a rat problem at all, or that this piper agreed on a sum of gold in exchange for his services. He just seems to have taken the children and left for good. And that's, it's not just speculation. That's a genuine historical source. That's a manuscript from around a few hundred years there and thereabouts after this supposedly happened. That's by no means the only piece of evidence for the piper's existence in real life. In 1370, so before the manuscript was even written, the friar Heinrich von Herford, who lived within a day's walk of Hamelin, he was in the area at the time, wrote the chronicle The Golden Chain. The last page of his tome stands out as really unusual, however, so it's in a different handwriting to Heinrich's from the rest of the book. In that handwriting, on the very last page, we see a supposed second-hand account of what happened on that terrible summer's day in Hamelin. And that page reads as follows. Here follows a marvellous wonder which transpired in the town of Hamelin in the diocese of Minden in the year of our Lord 1284 on the feast of Saints John and Paul. A certain young man, 30 years of age, handsome and well-dressed, so that all who saw him admired him because of his appearance, crossed the bridges and entered the town by the west gate. He then began to play all through town the silver pipe of a most magnificent sort. All the children who heard his pipe, in the number of 130, followed him to the east gate and out of the town to the so-called execution place, or Calvary. There they proceeded to vanish so that no trace of them could be found. The mothers of the children ran from town to town, but they found nothing. It is written, a voice was heard from on high, and a mother was bewailing her son. And as one counts the years according to the year of our Lord, or according to the first, second, and third year of an anniversary, so do the people in Hamelin reckon the years after the departure and disappearance of their children. So that's a harrowing account. Calvary in that situation, so the execution place of Calvary refers to Calvarian Hill, which is just outside the town. So it's almost as though they're saying some nutter entered town, took all the children up to this hill, and they were never seen again. Any thoughts or any interpretations of that?
I mean, this is like 1200s, you said, didn't
1284.
You? 1284.
Yeah. It supposedly happened on 1284. This was, this particular source is dated to around 1370.
Right. This is when record keeping is in full swing. You know what I mean? It's not as if we're, just making up fairy tales or what have you all the time. And the fact, again, I come back to the stained glass window, the fact you have those two pieces of evidence, the account of it, which is really quite baffling, and then the stained glass window almost commemorating this tragedy, which is what it sounds like. I also think the way they describe him, it's really interesting hearing the similarities to the fairy tale, his appearance, the silver pipe, obviously.
It's all consistent.
Exactly, all consistent. And I feel like if I try and think about, being alive in that era, if someone came through town playing a flute, dressed in all kinds of colourful garb, the kids would probably find that entertaining.
Something a bit different.
Yeah, it's like the modern day equivalent of an ice cream van. You know what I mean, for example. So can I believe that 100 kids would be following this guy? Yeah, absolutely. I can absolutely buy that. What happened to them though, Tom? That's where for me I'm like that break. I mean, this hill. Is he walking them off? Is it actually a mountain? Is it a cliff? But it sounds like this is this is something that has got its hooks into this community,
Mhm.
so much so they're commemorating it.
Yeah, yeah.
Bizarre.
That's exactly what it is. And I mean, there's numerous explanations for what or who the Piper might have been. But before we even begin to get into that, there's still more evidence. So there's an astounding amount of evidence for this case. So in 1384, an entry in Hamelin's town records opens with, "It is 100 years since our children left."
Oh my God.
So exactly 100 years after it supposedly happened. Backing up the fact that the Piper led them away in 1284, on the front of Hamelin's town hall, the following was also inscribed around that time. So that is, "In the year 1284, after the birth of Christ, from Hamelin were led away 130 children born at this place, led by a piper into a mountain."
This is so much effort for
It's ridiculous.
And also, as an aside, this is not something to make light of. If
No.
you're a small community that's kind of flourishing, you're not going to start telling a tall tale about how 130 of your children were abducted and never seen again. Like, that's not something you joke about as a parent, is it? And it's just this effort and this consistency. 100 years since, like, this is wild.
Or whatever it is must have been a huge event.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Heinrich von Herford, who is the monk who penned the Golden Chain, in which that last page showed up, he also commented on it himself as well. In the mid-14th century, he wrote a tome by the name of Catena Aurea. In that book, he speaks of a youth that appeared in Hamelin and played on a strange silver flute. He reports that every child that heard the flute followed this stranger, and corroborates that they left the town via the eastern gate towards the site of Calvarian Hill. Around the same time he published that work, a popular nursery rhyme would enter the public's repertoire, known as Zu Hamelin im Kloster, or At Hamelin in the Monastery. While the original copy of that nursery rhyme is missing, it's discussed again that the 130 children from Hamelin who were lured away by the Piper, it says that they were eaten alive by the hills of Calvaria, so they just disappeared. A supposed transcript of the rhyme produced by Heinrich Mabom in 1688 reads as follows: "Mary, hear us, for your son denies you nothing. 1284 is that year when members of both sexes languish through weakness, the year of the day John and Paul, which the 130 dear children of Hamelin swept away, and not without doom. It is said that Calvary swallowed them alive. Christ protect the guilty so that no similar evil fate overtake them."
I
Keeps
was
stacking up, doesn't it?
I was convinced halfway through, but there's just more and more evidence mounting and mounting. And like the nursery rhyme thing, it's just like the Black Death, the famous nursery rhyme we have about that pocket full of posies. Like, so I can absolutely believe that you would start to, not quite make light, but start to almost memorialise this tragic event.
If it was a big enough thing.
If it was a big enough thing. I also think two other thoughts, not to get too ahead of ourselves, but number one, there must be a mass grave somewhere. Because one man, I don't know how one man can kill 130 children in one fell swoop. I feel like it needs to be some mass, I don't know, falling off a cliff or drowning or something like in the nursery rhyme. And also, has this not just wiped out this community's next generation? Like, I'm surprised this community continued to exist almost.
So, moreover, Hamelin's Town Museum, it currently exhibits a section of the Old Town Gate, which was refurbished in 1556, and the following was inscribed on it around that time by the townspeople. So, in the year 1556, 272 years after the magician stole 130 children from the city, this gate was founded. Again, referring to him as a magician, or, the Piper.
Chilling.
Indicates again that it was a massively generationally traumatic event for the people of Hamelin, to the point where, several centuries later, they were still feeling the need to document this on monuments and town property. So that brings us to the end of the evidence from the time. There's a hell of a lot to unpack, and we'll go into theories in a moment, but any extra thoughts before we do?
For me, it's the biggest thing around this is the consistency of the evidence to it. Often, myths and legends, it starts out something fairly innocuous and inane, and then over time it becomes, it was actually a beast that did this, it was a monster, here it's consistently from the time it happened, almost by the sounds of it, been this same figure. Briefly seems to change to a magician, but that's it. He's all throughout he's been a piper. The number of children always seems to remain the same as well.
130 all the time.
130.
Yeah.
And again, this language about being swallowed up by the hills as if they've just disappeared, you know, from the earth. Really interesting. So
really
far.
eerie.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to hear some theories.
Yeah.
On it.
So the beauty of this one, obviously, is that we know that something happened. There's no beating around the bush with maybes. There's a staggering amount of evidence that something caused the 130 children to disappear in Hamelin in 1284. Now, of course, the most blatant explanation for this is that a predator lured hundreds of children into the hills to their deaths, perhaps luring the kids and their parents into a false sense of security with music. But is it really feasible that the parents would let their guard down this much and that nobody would notice any kids disappearing from the town?
Absolutely, but also where's one man hiding 130 bodies?
Exactly.
That would take you days, if not weeks. Like, by the time the townspeople know their children are gone, they're going to be racing to those hills to find them, and they're going to find a pile of corpses, aren't they?
Yeah. So, in the most popular iterations of the fairy tale, the piper took them away when the parents were all inside, but would not one person have noticed and attempted to stop him if he was a person?
Of course. And are you telling me none of these kids thought, actually, I'm going to go home?
Yeah.
Or ran away
Yeah.
when he started killing them, if that's what he did? Or thought, actually, I'm tired, I want to go to bed?
Yeah.
Like, that's not how kids work, that they're just going to blindly follow indefinitely.
I'm thinking as well, if this man did lure children into the hills, there was 130 children reportedly, would they not have thought, even, a couple of the older ones have thought to overpower him in any way?
Like,
just one man.
Absolutely. Like, I know they're children.
130 of
130 of anything.
I don't think I could defeat 130 children.
And Tom's a big lad. Like,
so American author William Manchester backs the idea that it was a person. He essentially stated that the piper could have been a psychopathic paedophile who used the children in unspeakable ways. Historians doubt Manchester's claims because he, without evidence, just claimed that the piper arrived on the 20th of June, 1484, 200 years after.
Good, because what a horrific thought that is. A psychopath paedophile.
Are paedophiles particularly powerful? Can they overpower that many people? I mean,
the ones I know and associate with aren't.
Some essentially suggest that the piper was not a real person, but instead symbolic of death by natural causes, figuratively leading the children into the next life. We do see this kind of symbolism in medieval tapestries and art. You see death represented as a skeleton to basically, was there a plague or a condition that was specifically harmful to children doing the rounds at the time? And to better cope with their loss, the parents created an explanation that would not be particularly so harmful. They're going to attach a magical story to it instead of just all our kids died.
I can absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
Like that could be some truth in it. I will say it's a bit odd that a lot of the early accounts seem to talk about how the children have disappeared and they don't know where they've gone. And I would have thought back then, if I'm not mistaken, monks and religion was quite closely tied to medicine. So I would have thought the people chronicling this, the monks, would have taken a more scientific angle, but then it is 1200, so I don't know. But
we're quite early on in the medieval period, I guess, overall, or the middle kind of stage of it. So alternatively, and you touched on this before, but could a freak accident have caused the deaths of hundreds of children? We've heard about this kind of thing in the Premonitions Bureau episode as well. Could a landslide have killed them? Could a flash flood have taken them as they played by the Weser River, resulting in a mass burial or drowning? But then, we get to the point, if so, would we have the archaeological evidence of a ton of dead children, basically?
Surely.
Preserved around Hamelin's spot on the Weser River? I'd think possibly. Especially when you consider that things tend to be preserved a lot better if they have been covered by the earth over time.
Sure. And also, what whatever town is downstream from Hamelin are surely going to
experience a similar thing.
experience 130 dead children washing up past them.
You'd
And that's
think-
going to be something they're going to chronicle themselves.
Yeah. It has been theorized that 130 children might have emigrated out of Hamelin, specifically to Transylvania in the late 13th century. And again, the piper in that case would play a figurative role in explaining what happened. So overpopulation in Lower Saxony at the time resulted in the oldest son of a family owning all the land and power, leaving the rest as serfs. Those serfs could then be sold on to the highest bidder. Historian and folklorist Wolfgang Mieder states that historical documents show people from Hamelin did help settle Transylvania at the same time. And author Emily Gerard directly claimed that those that travelled away were the lost children of Hamelin. Transylvania was left underpopulated after the Mongol invasions from Genghis Khan's grandsons coming over and decimating the area. And that time kind of just happens to coincide with the first stories of the Piper. You also hear stories of them emigrating to different parts of Germany or Poland. But that could be a potential explanation, I guess. It's one that I'm open to.
Very interesting. Would the parents not be going with them, though?
I guess it depends if they were sold into slavery or not. If they were going to work, and I don't know, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. I
mean, in that case, yeah, it is a very interesting thought. Like you say, it's a lot of the time creating these myths might help this community to cope with it, like you were saying before. I think there's absolutely some truth in that. So it is probably an easier explanation, than they were sold into slavery in Transylvania. Yeah, really interesting. And I don't know, does the Pied Piper feel like some nobleman? It sounds like he's dressed in quite, in certainly finery.
There is actually a little bit of evidence that you might find interesting if that is the case, if you are inclined to lean on that side. So if they didn't emigrate to Transylvania, as I mentioned, they might have moved closer to Berlin. Surnames that were common in Hamelin at the time the Piper allegedly arrived, they soon begin to show up in Uckermark and Prignitz, so not too far from the capital, just a few years later. So around this time as well, what were referred to as locators, so essentially medieval recruitment officers, were established in Germany. They offered rewards to young people who were willing to move to new lands in order to redistribute population densities across Germany after times of war. Conveniently, these locators were often brightly dressed and were described as silver-tongued.
Wow, okay.
Could they have been the Pipers? So if so, however, I mean, why don't we see these tales cropping up in other German towns? Is the only thing that I'm inclined to go back to with that.
This is the problem with this story. You just think you might be onto something.
Yeah.
And then you bring it back and make a point like that. Well, if this is the case, surely there'd be dozens of Pied Pipers.
Would the story of the Piper not have kind of slowly trickled out to other areas?
They'd probably even be known as Pipers instead of recruitment officers. There goes the Piper or what have you, taking kids off to resettle other areas of Germany.
I mean, a final theory, this would be slightly a darker one, is that we look at the possibility of a mass hysterical outbreak, which caused the children to leave against their own free will, possibly in the form of a dancing plague. So we've seen this kind of thing before. For example, in 1237, so before the Piper is alleged to have arrived, a large group of children involuntarily travelled from Erfurt to Arnstadt, roughly a 12-mile trip, jumping and dancing the entire way. Could a similar thing have happened, which the citizens of Hamelin chalked up to some sort of supernatural magical power, perhaps? There's every possibility that potentially it could have. And, it seems like there's so many explanations for this case, all of which are just as plausible as the others.
That's the thing. None of them stand out as being more or less plausible. Yeah. Could it have been a murderous paedophile? Yes.
Could have been.
Could it have been that this fella genuinely did some work and wasn't paid properly and then drowns them all? Yeah. Yes. Could it be that he was a recruitment officer? Yeah. I don't know. They all seem plausible, but That's what I mean. It's frustrating because none of them stand out really.
I wouldn't put it past modern day recruitment officers to kill 130 kids for a quick buck as well, to be honest. I mean, so that kind of brings us to the end. So the Pied Piper is, of course, a tremendously famous tale today, all over Western Europe and beyond. The town of Hamelin has actually adopted it as a key piece of local folklore and history. The Hamelin Museum is full of tales and pieces of evidence surrounding the Piper. And one of the town's streets, known as Bungerlusenstrasse, or the street without drums, completely forbids music or dancing to this very day. The street is said to have been the very last place that any adult in Hamelin saw the children before they disappeared into the hills forever. And that legacy has kind of lived on, and by all accounts, nobody ever saw these kids again. Any kind of final comments before we close it off for the day?
The more I think about it, the more I don't think it was something mundane.
No.
I don't think this was a recruitment officer. I don't think this was a murderer. Because why are you going so over and above to chronicle this as a disaster, as something horrific, and not something that's run of the mill, if that makes sense?
I guess one thought with it, if it was a murderer or a paedophile or something along those lines, I guess in the 1200s, if a mental nutter was going around attacking kids with less technology set up to catch him quickly, could he have got away with killing way more than maybe a murderer in the modern day would have before he was caught? Maybe there is. Maybe that's if it was something sinister, maybe that's the kind of thing to look at. But when you say not mundane, what kind of thing are you thinking? If you were to put a name to it, it's a hard one.
That's tough, Tom.
Because you don't just want to be like, it was aliens.
Yeah.
It's,
and again, to what you've just said there, yeah, I totally agree. It's probably a hell of a lot easier to get away with murder back then. In fact, it is. But 130 murders and what? No bodies found? For the reasons we've already covered, again, I don't see that as a possibility.
No.
And the way it's this description of them disappearing into the hills and just never being seen again. No finding of a mass grave. No sightings of drownings from neighbouring villages or what have you. I don't know.
You'd think that if it was such a big deal in discourse for it to have been mentioned 270 years later, there would have been something else from other towns that would have mentioned something.
Absolutely.
And you see little bits pop up here and there. I mean, that there are kind of like Heinrich of Hereford, for example, who lived within a day's travel of Hamelin. He talked about it, so it was plainly something that was known in the area. Yeah. But interestingly, why don't we have more of those sources? Why aren't more monks talking about it if it was such a huge thing?
Absolutely. And why is it so consistent?
Yeah.
Why is no one saying, well, actually, it could have been this? We obviously have a slight change when they talk about the magician instead of the piper, but other than that, also just something as simple as why is the final page of the gold chain, is it called?
The golden chain.
Golden chain. Why is that in different handwriting? Was this
who else?
A relative of someone, a grandfather of, a grandson of someone who was there or what have you? I can't remember when the specific dates were, but yeah, very, very bizarre. And I do love stories like this because it's one where you kind of leave with almost no idea about what's gone on there.
It raises more questions than it answers, doesn't it?
It's almost a bit supernatural.
It feels it, doesn't it?
Do I believe these children disappeared? Yes. I don't think it was something mundane, but I don't know what it was. I've no idea. I mean, you talked about aliens.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Wild.
I mean, sadly, we may never know who or what truly led the children away from Hamelin in that fateful June of 1284. Was the Piper a predator, a fictitious analogue, or perhaps, involuntarily or otherwise, a mysterious mass exodus from an unassuming medieval town? Let us know what you think to this. We would really, really love to hear your thoughts. It's such a weird and intriguing one. As always, thank you so much for listening. We have been the Campfire Archives, and we will see you in the next episode.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you'd like to reach out or even submit a story, you can contact us at hello.campfirearchives@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can follow us at campfire_archives on Instagram. See you there.